Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a place where interesting people come to talk about their creative outlets. As for myself, I'm an author, podcast host, travel enthusiast, and lover of the outdoors. If you'd like to learn more about my published works or adventures, go to my website, ericpbishop.com. I hope you enjoy the show, and please go out and support today's guest. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to another episode of A Tale of Two Scribes, and tonight I am pleased to have Brad Taylor on the program. Hi, Brad.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to see you again, Eric.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's been a minute. So before we go too far, though, not something we normally do on the podcast, but Brad's publisher was kind enough to send me a copy of his latest book, Into the Gray Zone, and I want one of you to have it that are watching or listening to the podcast. How you do it, it's really simple. If you go to YouTube and you leave a comment after you've watched the episode, I will pick one winner from the comments, and it's a hardcover. You get to win a hardcover book. And the rest of you need to go out and buy it, and it's out on Tuesday,
April 22nd.
April 22nd. There we go. Uh, well, Pike 19. How
Yeah,
in the world are we at Pike 19 already?
nobody's more surprised than me, I'll tell you that.
Well, and that's what I want to start to get into first. Before we go into how you got published, which I love the story. I've heard it before, but I think our audience is new to it, so I want them to hear it. Um, you started off like a lot of people did, and you went into college, obviously, graduated.
Mhm.
Did you know going into college you were then going to join the military after that? Was that part of the plan?
Yeah, I was in ROTC in
Okay.
college, so I had to do 4 years of ROTC before I took my commission.
Gotcha. Okay. So that was part of the that was part okay. I don't know if I've asked you that before. I didn't remember. And so I was like, well, I want to know if that's how. So get out, join the army, and like they always say, you get to go see the world and do amazing
Yeah.
things. So 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 talk about that progression. You get out, when did you got commissioned, obviously. Um, and you came out this was pre 9/11,
Oh, yeah.
obviously. But your time in service, though, definitely stretched into
Yeah.
the Iraq and the Afghanistan conflicts. So what was that like from a military standpoint, um, leading up to 9/11? You're in a, generally speaking, peacetime. I know there's always stuff going on, but there's a lot of training going on when we're not in active war. And then 9/11 happens, and for the next 20 years, we're in active conflict, basically. So how was that from your
Yeah.
perspective?
Well, I mean, it may sound sick to say, but when you're in the army, you want to go to war. That's what you want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, you've trained for it. That's the thing you want to do. I was an infantry lieutenant, commissioned as infantry officer right off the bat, and they had just cause happen. I was a platoon leader,
Hmm.
and I missed that. And we were sitting there going, "What the hell? That's not fair." And then Desert Storm happened, and I actually deployed to the Sinai, was just to put kick sand in my eyes. The
Hmm.
101st was doing the Sinai rotation, but they needed them to go fight the war. So they needed somebody to backfill them. So I went to the Sinai.
Okay.
And once again, gnashing of teeth, wailing, gnashing of teeth. I finished that up. My infantry time, I went to Special Forces Assessment Selection,
Hmm.
went out to Okinawa, did a tour in Okinawa, which is a lot of unique stuff out there in all the various Southeast Asian countries. Came back from that and tried out for a special mission unit. Made it through that, made it through OTC, and then it was a troop commander when 9/11 hit.
Okay.
And then once that happened, I mean, careful what you wish for, because
Mm.
I certainly got more than I needed.
Right. Yeah, I had my college roommate actually, for my freshman year. He made it through 3 years of college, and his mom had wanted him to really kind of wanted him to get the degree and be a teacher, and he wanted to join the army. So I graduated, and
Yeah.
soon after I graduated, like I said, he was a year behind me. He was like, "I'm joining the army," and sure enough, he did. Uh, Joined the infantry and ended up going to qualify himself, and he was part of fifth group. His
Hmm.
career is already over. He's at that spot where man, it might be like 3 years now. He's been retired. But so I kind of got to see, I've never served, so I got the experience through kind of his lens, and he'd come back, and there's
Yeah.
things that probably he shouldn't have showed me that, but he had lots of photos and other stories, so he would kind of share stuff with me. Brought me back a lot of flags. So I have flags, a bunch of flags in my house from different parts of the world that have significance. And every now and then I'll get a phone call from him, and it'll just remind me like, how are my flags? And I'm like, they're fine. They're fine. I didn't. They are protected. So but yeah, it was kind of my connection to what was happening, and just to also see what that does to people. See the because like you were saying, be careful what you wish for. Serving during a peacetime versus he wanted to be in there. He was single, never got married while he was in the military. So for him, the action was to be deployed. He did not want to be, stuck home just on a base training or whatever like that.
Yeah.
So he took as many as he could. So he did Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Lebanon. I mean, just anywhere they would put him in fifth group, he was raising his hand to try to get out there. Um, so after your deployments and stuff, I think what was interesting is before you became Brad Taylor, New York Times bestseller, you were actually teaching at the Citadel.
Yeah.
How did that occur? What was the
Yeah, I
background
finished
on
up.
that?
I'd been deployed since 9/11. I mean, not
Okay.
continuously, but if you're not deployed, you're preparing to deploy. So it was kind of a grind. I had moved up through the ranks, had a few troops, had a squadron command, finished up squadron command, and was kind of, burned out, and I just needed a break.
Okay.
And so I looked around, and it turned out that they had the XO of the Army Department here at the Citadel is always a special forces guy. Used to be anyway. I think I was
Mhm.
the last one, to be honest. And so I called him and said, I didn't know him, but I said, hey, I'm SF2. How'd you get that job? And little undercover brother stuff. Turned out the guy that runs the sessions for the Eastern Seaboard of RTC was my S3 when I was an infantry lieutenant way back in the day. And so, I gave him my curriculum vitae. Here's what I've done,
Yeah.
and I got the job. And I was only going to do 2 years there and then go back into the fight. I came out in the promotion list to colonel. My next assignment was unaccompanied to Pakistan.
Okay.
My daughter was entering high school, and I had a lot of time on my hands leaving the special mission unit, going to RTC. I mean,
Hmm.
you teach in classes. It was rewarding, but once I built the classes, you teach a class on Monday, where you're teaching the same class Tuesday, same class Wednesday, same class Thursday. And after a year, the second year, it was just rinse and repeat of the first year, and I just had a lot of time on my hands. And so I wrote a book because it was just a bucket list thing of mine I always wanted to
Right.
do. And it ended up selling. And so then I had to make a choice. I couldn't go back to the world I'd left and publish a novel. That
Right.
wasn't going to happen. So I turned down the promotion, decided to give writing a try, and
Mhm.
here I am.
And here you are, 19 books later. Um, Was it difficult for you to step away and enter, obviously a dramatically different field, a career choice? Was it hard to walk away though from because you were
Yeah,
active duty for
yeah.
how
I
many
mean,
years? 20, 22?
22.
Okay.
Yeah, it was hard. It was. I mean, you had to make the choice. You had to make a decision on what you're going to do. So I mean, it wasn't any harder than joining the army, I guess. I mean, it's a different world, but once you make that decision, it's not like I, stepped out of my door and said, "What are all these cars doing here, rats are frassing?" I mean, I live in the world, so when I
Yeah.
decided to hang up the uniform, the hard part's of camaraderie, the sense of mission, that kind of thing. I really miss
Mhm.
that. But I had left such a unique world anyway. I mean, I didn't wear a uniform ever. I changed when I got to work and changed when I left. So
Right. Um, what was it about Charleston? So I know with the Citadel being there and teaching there, did you just fall in love with that area, which is easy to do, I think. I've been down there enough over the years, but
yeah, sort of. My family, I grew up in Texas, but
right.
my family is from here.
Okay, gotcha.
My grandmothers and grandfathers lived in Mount Pleasant. My dad went to the Citadel. My aunts and uncles still live here,
Hmm.
and I spent my summers here. So
Okay.
whenever it's time to go visit the grandparents, I came over here.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of history with it. I have a sister who went to college in Charleston. I have a twin brother who went to the Citadel.
Hmm.
So I was just going to do it for the job because I like the area. And then when I sold the book and to retire, this is just where I retired.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And well, and you've seen it there. You've been there long enough to really see as I mean, it's crazy how far it keeps every time I don't come down that often anymore. Maybe
Yeah.
once a year, maybe 9 months, 9 months to a year. Every so often I'll come down for one reason or another. And I swear every time I'm like, okay, this accent wasn't here before. That's
Yeah, well,
changed.
COVID. Well, two things happened. COVID happened, and everybody in the Northeast moved down here.
Yeah.
Literally, there was
Right.
just every car had some foreign plate on it, and I do mean foreign. And they also got a bunch of manufacturing. Boeing opened up a huge facility, took over
Yeah.
everything. Nexton, which is a town now, it was just a manufacturing facility. Nexton's Volvo, Mercedes. There's one other car company. They're building manufacturing there, so that's huge. So it has really, really grown. I remember when I
Yeah.
first got here, the Ravenel Bridge has got 4 lanes going both ways.
Hmm.
Used to be the Cooper River Bridge, the old run there used to be a metal bridge when I
Yeah.
was a kid. And they built the Ravenel Bridge. I mean, not too long ago, but it's been there about, I don't know, 15 years or so.
Right.
No, longer than that. But when I first got here, there'd be two cars on it. I'm like, why in the hell they put 4 lanes on this bridge? Well, now at 5 o'clock, all 4 lanes are bumper to
Or
bumper.
bumper. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I think they had I guess they had some foresight. Of course, I don't know. I'm outside of the Greenville area, and I go to Greenville
Yeah.
quite frequently. I was just down there for a baseball game this last weekend, and they did like a massive redo of the 385 interchange. I think they just finished it up maybe 2 years ago. It's already too. It still is gridlock when you get down there between 4:30 and 7 o'clock every night. You know you're gonna.
Yeah, they can't keep up here. So this Highway 17, which runs up north Mount Pleasant,
Yep.
when I first moved here, it was a 2 lane road.
Hmm.
And so there was always traffic.
Yeah.
Well, now it's spread out to a 4 lane road, but
Oh
there's
yeah.
still always
There's
traffic.
still always traffic, yeah. Yeah, that's one area that over the years, because I started going down there probably early 90s the first time, or mid 90s. So I've definitely, my once a year visit sometimes, I just kind of seen how it just continues to grow and sprawl. But I will say, the one thing they've done, which I'm proud of them, is they do have one of the best pizza places in the Southeast, which is not far from you, Coastal Crust, which is right there in Mount Pleasant. Um,
Really, I haven't been there.
you've not been, okay, I'll send you,
No,
I'll
because
send you the,
there's a pizza place that Italians actually own that we go. La Pizzeria. It's legitimate
legit.
Italian pizza.
Okay. This is a coal-fired one. The way they do it, it's or wood-fired one. Man, it's my kids had found it first. They were down there with a family member or whatever, and then they put one up in Greenville, South Carolina. So,
Oh
uh,
yeah,
yeah, so the kids on a regular basis, it's like, Dad, Coastal Crust, and it's just like, okay, drive down to Coastal Crust. But we go down every so often, and I've been down a couple times last year to Johns Island, actually. So I haven't come your side
yeah.
of Charleston recently. Probably been about 2.5 years, but they have one on Johns Island now as well. So can
John's
my
Island's actually growing big time too.
yeah, so I got a buddy that's in a band and he lives out that way. And so I've taken Bruce, since Bruce is into music now, I've taken him down a couple times to hang out and we'll always go to that area. Yeah, I've definitely
Yeah.
seen. And well again, the spread just they're gonna find a way to spread out and go wherever
I mean,
they
the only
can.
good thing about Charleston, it is on a peninsula. So Charleston, historic Charleston, is you're not going to get any bigger. It's
Yeah,
just, unless you're going to build in the ocean.
yeah, exactly.
I mean, the
Don't give him
people
any
there that
ideas.
the blue bloods that are down there, the guys that have been there forever since the signing of the Declaration of Independence, they actually have a phrase for it. So you're either from Charleston or you're from off,
From
meaning you're
off.
from off the peninsula. So my family
Ah,
would be from off, even though we're in Mount Pleasant.
even though you're in Mount Pleasant, right?
So if you live down there by Broad Street, you're from Charleston.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, so that last time I saw you was actually at Ted's house, I think, Ted Bell's house,
Yeah,
for his final book signing. So, which might be the last time I was downtown. I can't remember now. Like I said, it's been a little bit, not as common for me to come down the last couple of years. Just life changed, and
yeah,
even the summers, I've taken the kids a lot up to Tennessee to like water parks and stuff. Dollywood and all that fun
yeah.
stuff. Oh goodness, but the kids love it, and but that's actually been cut off until recently with after the storm. 40 was shut
Oh
down.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I went up
That's
to
right.
Nashville to see my son. Turned 18 and he was at a bluegrass conference in Nashville. So I surprised him and drove up there. But you couldn't go 40. I had to go through Hot Springs, and I got to
Yeah,
actually unfortunately see a lot of the devastation that had really happened up there. Because up until then, I had only really seen it on TV. There's stuff around me that got messed up pretty bad, but nothing like those small communities that just got
yeah,
really just washed out. So
yeah. We lucked out. We didn't get any damage at all. I mean,
yeah,
you would think we would have, but we were completely clear.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Um, so one thing I want to ask you too is something that you did you did a couple of unique things when you got going, which other people I think have kind of emulated the Brad Taylor model now is you started writing in first and third person
Yeah.
with your book. So anytime Pike's talking, it's a Pike chapter, you're going first person.
Yeah.
Anyone outside of the Pike character, you've got a third person. So I did want to, I think I've heard you say it before, but for our audience, what was the thought process behind going that direction? And then also, the other thing to follow it up with is you did something really unique for quite a few years. How many years you do it for? For like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. You wrote 2 books a year,
Yeah.
which probably aged you a little bit.
Yeah,
So,
sure did.
so talk about those two things for us.
Yeah, so they actually go in first person and third person. When I wrote my first book, I mean, I just free flowed the whole thing,
Yeah.
and it was all in third person.
Okay.
And anybody asked me about writing, what would you do? I would say go get a freelance editor, because that's what I did. I actually
Okay.
was, I tried to find an agent, things like that. It wasn't working. Found a freelance
Mhm.
editor, had to read the book, and it was gruelingly painful. She was mean as can be. I mean, just a ego deflating thing. I'd come home and Elaine would say, "You got an email from," I was like, "Oh," and it'd just be this brutal because I didn't even have my own email at the time. I was still in the army and army.mil. I didn't give her that,
Right.
and she had me write there's a little writing exercise, and I just was just say, "This is like kindergarten. I'm not in a writing class. Just edit the book." And one time she said, "I want you to write, and from Pike's perspective, I want you to write his background."
Okay.
And 2 pages, send it to me. And if you can't do it right now, I want it in the next 15 minutes. You haven't put enough time in this character. You haven't thought about it.
Wow.
And so I just got so mad. I just like, okay. And so you remember The Jerk, the movie with Steve
Steve
Martin?
Martin. Yeah.
He was born a small black child, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's how I started out, just being a complete smartass all the way through. And just was like, bang, 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 bang. What do you think of that? And sent it to her. And she said, this is some of the best stuff you've written. I
Wow.
think you need to change everything from Pike into first person.
Okay.
And so then I had to go back through the entire book and start basically over
Yeah.
and redo everything. But it worked out. I mean, I completely agree with her because you can say a lot more in first person than you can
Sure.
in third person. There's reasons to have third person, which I like as well, because sometimes I'll shift it even when Pike's there. It'll be in Jennifer's POV because I want her to say what the hell's
Hmm.
going on in here.
Right.
And people ask me that, how did you know you could break that rule? I'm like, I didn't know it was a rule. Nobody
Right.
said that to me. If I'd have known it was a rule and she'd have told me to do it, I'd have said, you can't do that. That's illegal. But I didn't have any writing instruction whatsoever except
Yeah.
reading. And
Right.
Nelson DeMille had done it.
Hmm.
Joseph Fender had done it. So I was like, well, I like their books. So that's
Hmm.
why I'm going to do it.
Yeah. And then so in the decision to do 2 books, was that yours or the publisher's decision?
It was the publisher's decision, but it was
Okay.
I'm the one that doomed myself. So I was doing a lot of security consulting.
Right.
And because I'd look at my schedule and I'd say, the books, I'm just pick a date, books due in December. I look at my schedule from July through, you know, November. I'm going to have security contracts, which I'm not going to be able to write. So I need to get the book in July.
Hmm.
Well, I would do that. And they would do cheetah flips and say, wow, he's in here 5 months early. I would get mad at him and say, why aren't you putting the book out? Because the books are all based on current events.
Right.
And if something goes wrong in the world, the book could be irrelevant by the
Hmm.
time it comes out. Things are always changing. And so I would bitch and moan about it. Why aren't you putting my book out? I gave it to you, put it out. I mean, what's the difference here? All you got to do is hit print, right? Get it going. And they reminded me that, you're not our only author. We have
What?
a schedule we're doing, and you're in December, buddy. And so I did that for 2 or 3 books, and they said, okay, you want to do a book every 6 months? We can do that. I'll put it in when you give it to me, we'll put it out, but you're writing another one right after that.
Right up. Yeah.
And so I was like, well, hell, I can do that. I've been doing it.
Hmm.
And then it turns out it's a hell of a lot easier to turn a book in early than it is to only get 6 months
Yeah.
because it's the pressure on it was so enormous. I was doing a book tour marketing one book while
Hmm.
I was editing a second book and writing the third book.
Right.
It just got to be so much. And I did it, I was successful at it. And to this day, I look back at that and say, I don't know how in the hell I
How did
managed
you
to do
do
that. Because
that?
I was still doing security contracting. I was still doing book research trips. And I was also writing short stories every
Yeah.
time, too. So I'd have 2 short stories, 2 book research trips, 2 book tours, all the security contracting, and it just I look back on that going, I don't know what in the world I was thinking. And it got to a point where I was writing, the book was it? Ring of Fire. I was writing Ring of Fire,
Yeah.
and I was about halfway done, and maybe a little bit more, maybe two-thirds of the way done, and it was due like in 2 days.
Wow.
And I was like, that's not going to make it. I'm not
Yeah.
going to make this deadline. I told Lane, I was like, I'm missing this deadline. Well, then out of the blue, my publisher called me and said, hey, we're thinking about going back to one book a year.
Hmm.
And I was like, yeah,
What
because
do you know?
they were doing all this math, and you're cannibalizing your own sales, and they'd done all this projection and everything. And they
Interesting.
said the two book a year thing has served its purpose. We want to go back to one book a year, blah blah blah, for all these publishing reasons,
Yeah.
which I just went over my head, and I was like, sounds good to me.
Right.
And that's
Thank
what I did.
you. Thank you for me
Yeah,
not having to ask for this change.
right.
So, yeah, I think about that might have been about the first time I met you. It was 2000. Actually, yeah, I think the Ring of Fire book tour was the first time. I think it came down to Charleston. I don't know if I met you there or did I meet you at Thriller Fest? I don't. It's getting too long now,
Yeah,
um, but I want to say one thing to the audience too, especially, and I want to toot your horn for a second because whether it was the book, whether it was at your signing in Charleston or seeing you in New York, I was new to the game. I had started writing in 2014. I didn't start querying till around 15 was a joke. I guess 16, I took it serious. And then 17, I went to Thriller Fest and I actually did Pitch Fest. Um,
yeah,
and I got to meet authors like, yourself and just, authors that I looked up to and read their books. And the one thing that was so cool, and I didn't expect it, is you guys are so damn nice to people that
yeah.
that have
Appreciate it.
no reputation, that they haven't proved themselves, they haven't sold a book. And it was kind of one of those moments of it kind of made me realize that, because I think part of my thought process that was wrong was I kind of looked up to people, in the writing world, and then you look up to people in like maybe sports or entertainment, and there's such like a level up there that you can't even contact these people. But with writers, when you go to conferences, you can sit in a room with them, and like
Yeah,
yourself, you'll sit there at the bar, and someone can, as long as they're not interrupting your conversation with Elaine or with someone else, someone can come by and say, "Hey, Brad, how are you?" And you're not like, "Please,
right.
what are you
Well,
doing?"
the
You're,
truth of the
you're
matter is,
totally down to earth.
I didn't call myself a writer I must have been writing for 6 years before I even put that down on anything,
I mean, yeah,
because I just didn't feel like it. I mean, I was like,
right.
yeah, I've written a book, but I don't call myself a writer.
That imposter syndrome is a hard thing to shake.
Yeah,
It really is. And the other thing too that I want to say thank you. I think I've told you in person before, but when I was writing what became my debut, The Body Man, but it was my fourth completed book, I was in a spot. I had met you several times at that point. I had your number, and you were kind to give me advice. And I was in this one spot where I had my character being tortured on an oil platform.
yeah, yeah. I remember that.
I was trying to figure out how do I get this FBI HRT team over there. And I spent nights researching it, looking at all these things, and I'm like, a sub, man, that's stupid. A helicopter, they're gonna see this thing coming in. So finally I was desperate and I just said, who do I know that's like really smart and probably knows the answer to this? Brad Taylor. Hopefully, I don't piss him off by sending this. So I texted you, said, "Hey, this is the scenario. What do you think? What am I missing here? How would you do this?" And super simple, super cool response. You're just like, "They have to resupply the oil platform somehow, don't they, Eric?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Aha!" So I was able to bring in a boat. And probably you don't know this, as an homage, as a thank you for that. The captain of that resupply boat is named Brad Taylor. For anyone that's actually
No, I did
seen that.
not. That's cool.
I never told you. I was like, if he ever sees it, he sees it. If not, I won't say it. But I was like, I thought about it the other day. I was like, I've ever even told Brad that he's got a cameo in a book that he doesn't even know about. So, but no, it was kind of cool. Again, from someone just starting off in the industry to kind of get that support from people that are established. And
Yeah,
again, I think part of that reminder, and then I've said this a lot in the podcast when I've had different guests on, is that one unique thing about authors is most of the time this isn't their first rodeo. They've had another career, maybe multiple careers,
yeah,
and by the time they become an author, they might have a family that, they have all these kind of life experiences. When someone new's coming in, they know what that person's going through. And they're like, hey, maybe I can spend a couple minutes giving someone advice, and that will hopefully help change, hopefully get them on the right path because it's so
yeah,
easy to fall off the path with, like you were mentioning, all the rejection when you're trying to get agents and you're
yeah,
trying to get your foot in the door. It's a brutal business, like a lot of businesses are. But to get that advice from folks that have kind of walked that path already, it can really help save people a lot of heartache, which Probably will
Yeah, it
still have
does.
publishing,
Yeah.
but one other thing too I wanted to ask you is I kind of don't model myself after what you're doing, but I have this Brad Taylor thought process of I want to be able to tell stories and go to the physical places. And I love when you, or if it's Elaine doing it, I love seeing the posts online that are showing
Yeah.
where you guys are, for book research. So my question to you, if you can let me know in a secret, is do you think about where you want to go in the world and build a story around it, or do you have a thought for a story and go, okay, this is where we'll need to go to do the research?
It goes either way.
Either
I've
way,
done
okay.
it both ways. I've researched it. I come up with a plot sometimes, and like the plot only exists in one place. Like Dead Man's Hand, my last book,
Hmm.
that was about Ukraine and Russia and Putin. Obviously, that's I'm going there. I'm not going to set that in the Caribbean.
Right.
Um, Other times, like No Fortunate Son, uh, Elaine wanted to go on the trip this time, and I said, where do you want to go? And she said, well, my family's from Ireland. Let's go to Ireland. And I sat there and thought, how am I going to make a terrorist plot out of Ireland? So that was from the scratch. I just started doing research and saying, what can
Okay.
I come up with for Ireland? In this case, for the book we're here for today, Into the Gray Zone, this came out of a news story about a year ago. A guy, a Sikh in Canada, a Canadian national,
Hmm.
was killed in a drive-by shooting, hit the
Okay.
ground, dead. No big deal. I mean, didn't even really make the news here, at least, and probably made local news there. Well, then a month later, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Canadian government came out and said he was killed by RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing, which is the CIA of India.
Hmm.
Research and Analysis Wing came over here and assassinated that guy. And I was like, and of course that made big news.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? What in the world? India's assassinating people in Canada? That makes no sense. And so I was like, there's something to that.
Yeah.
And a month later, the FBI in the United States arrested an Indian national who was trying to assassinate another Sikh guy. And they said the research and analysis wing hired this guy to kill this guy. And at that point, I was like, oh my goodness, there's something going on
There's
here. And
right.
so I started doing the research, and that's what kind of drove me to India.
Yeah. Well, yes. And that's kind of one of those things that I think is so it helps the readers because if you can go somewhere and you can go to the location, smell, taste the food, and
Yeah,
then I think it just gives that element of not that you can't write from your couch. I always tell people, hey, people don't have the resources to always travel. But if you can, and if you can kind of take your readers on a different, especially somewhere they won't go. Like I want to talk about this trip to India, because that's the first thing actually when I got the book last week from the publisher. First thing I did was I always read the acknowledgments first. And I loved kind of, and I got a couple questions kind of lined up for that. Of I love seeing like that, how you kind of break down the detail in your acknowledgments of kind of those trips and what happened
yeah,
and why the thing started. And yeah, circling back to that. So for Ireland, I actually took my mom to Ireland, but I don't know if I texted you or not. I took my mom back
yeah.
to
I
Ireland
remember that.
in November for Thanksgiving. So we were actually
Yeah.
at the Guinness Storehouse on Thanksgiving. I spent my Thanksgiving day drinking at the Guinness place. So great place to spend Thanksgiving, by the way. But there was a meaning to my madness was was planning out the book that's coming out here this summer, my fifth book, and I wanted to do a setting in Ireland. So I kind of found a spot, and I wanted to do it around the Blarney
Yeah,
Castle. So I ended up taking the tour down the Blarney Castle, and I did all this stuff, and then was able to fictionalize it while I was on the bus and also on the flight back. I wrote most of the chapter that it heavily happens in. So, and I think that stuff resonates with people when because you can put some details in there that you're not going to
yeah,
necessarily get
most
from
definitely.
Google Earth or whatever. Like a few years ago, you guys did like Australia. So
Yeah.
was that your idea, or was that Elaine's idea, or is that a story idea that popped up?
That that was actually a story idea that came. I was going to write about the Taiwan Strait,
Okay.
and the first thing I did was start looking at Taiwan Strait, artificial intelligence, China, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And I started writing about the F-35. Well, it turns out they make F-35s in Australia, and there's also a huge diaspora of Chinese in Australia. And by the way, they also assassinated a a Australian Parliament guy got killed 2 days after he said, I am a spy for China. And then they found him dead. And I'm like, what? Okay, we're going to Australia. And
Wow.
Elaine wanted to dive the Great Barrier Reef too. So
I can respect that. I can respect that. I'm planning a trip there next end of next summer or early fall with some friends. That's right before I turn 50. That's I've kind of like
Yeah.
made a list of some of those big places I want to go, and I've already told my boss I'm taking 2 weeks off or I'm quitting. I've kind of laid all the groundwork down of like because that's the place, and you can attest to this. That's not a 7 day trip. I mean, just with
No.
flights alone. So I think we're going to fly into Auckland, do probably a week in New Zealand, and then a week
Oh,
in
that'd be cool.
and then a
Yeah.
week
So
in
we
Australia.
we spent a week in Taiwan and then flew to Australia, which
Okay.
I kind of thought, oh, they're right next to each other. It'd be a 2 hour flight, but you might as well fly back to the States, trying to
Right.
get to Australia.
Yeah, no, well, and people that haven't traveled international, I don't, they sometimes it is a big world. It looks like it might be small or
Hmm.
whatever, but no, when you start getting on these like over 10, and you've had a lot of them over your life, over
Yeah.
10, 12 hour flights, it's just like, oh my goodness. I'm not looking forward to the what, 16, 17, 18, whatever it is to Australia. I'm not looking forward to that one, but it'll be okay. Well, let's talk about Into the Gray Zone. So again, India is something that you've really not touched on, especially for a focal point for one of your Pike novels. So before we talk about the plot, and you can kind of give the listeners and people that are watching it kind of the elevator pitch of what happens. What was your experience like traveling there? Because it's one of those places that I don't think, myself included, I don't think people appreciate it as much as they probably should, because it's so far out there,
Yeah.
and very few
Up,
people from America tend to go.
and I mean, you hit the nail on the head about wanting to get the sight, sound, smells of the area.
Yeah.
And it's if I can get on the ground, I definitely want to get on the ground because you're always going to learn something. I usually say there's 50% I'm looking for, so I have a list. I'm going to go do this, this, and this
Yeah.
when we get to India. In this case, we started out in Mumbai, went all the way down the state of Goa, went over to New
Mhm.
Delhi, Old Delhi, drove to Agra, then went from Agra to Jaipur, and then Jaipur back to Mumbai. And so on each spot, I've got something I want to look at, but there's something that's looking for me, and I don't even know it's there until I get on the ground and start running around. And
Hmm.
it could be atmospherics or it could be an actual site. In this case, it was both. So we're driving around Mumbai, and there's this James Bond villain looking house or it's a building, and it's 27 stories tall. And it turns out it's the largest residence in the world, and
Yeah.
a billionaire owns it. And He's family of six lives in it. It's got 27 floors. First six floors are antique cars, so his own garage. He's got a
Hmm.
room that snows on you. He's got a room for his sacred cow. I mean, it's just this giant, cost 3 billion to build, helipad on the roof. And they'll show it to you every time, any taxi cab will point it out. Well, I didn't know that thing existed, but as soon as I saw it, I'm like, that's making the book.
Yeah.
And so I started doing research on that. Atmospherics wise, it's the books are kind of espionage, Jason Bourne type stuff.
Hmm.
Sooner or later, they're going to do dismounted surveillance. That's just what happens in the real world.
Right.
And within about 2 hours on the ground in Mumbai, which is supposedly this multicultural city, I
Hmm.
realized that is not happening. Not in India. Everywhere we went, it's like a record scratch. As soon
Yeah.
as we walk in the door, everybody's looking because the gringo's in the room. And it
I
wasn't
was gonna
because
say
you were doing anything wrong.
they're
It was
not
just
saying it's Brad Taylor. Holy cow, look who's
no.
here.
But they all look at you. Train stations, no matter where we went,
Yeah.
every time we went somewhere, they'd coalesce around a lane and they would want to get a selfie with her.
Of
No matter, I mean,
course.
there was just when that happened, I was just like, there's absolutely no way
Yeah.
Pike and Jennifer are going to do dismounted surveillance following somebody through the streets of Mumbai. Now, once you left Mumbai, it was even worse. You get down to Goa, to Old Delhi. I mean,
Hmm.
then you're the only gringo within 5,000 miles.
Yeah.
And I that was an eye opener. I had to figure that out. Okay, now how am I going to write this book? Because if I wrote a scene like that, because I would just assume you could do it.
Hmm.
I mean, I've been to Mexico City, been everywhere else, and I was like, okay, you can do it there, you can do it here.
Right.
You're not doing it there. I can tell you that. I mean, even Bangkok is not nearly. It was just uh, a shock to the senses everywhere we went. So if I hadn't got on the ground, I'd never known that.
Yeah. Was that one of the things that probably surprised you the most that you stood out as much as you did?
Yeah, actually, it did because I've been all over the world. I mean, um, it was almost like being in constant Fallujah everywhere you
Mm.
went. Not that they were mean. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean that I felt threatened. I
Yeah.
just mean that when you walked in, somebody was going to shake your hand because they wanted to practice their English, or they wanted to take a selfie, or they wanted to find out where you're from. Everywhere we went, that happened. I mean, everywhere.
Everywhere.
Unless you went to when you got back in the hotel where the Westerners were, then it was more like being in New York City.
Hmm.
There's some Indian people, there's some Chinese people, there's Americans, there's British, and there's me. Once you left that out the front of the hotel, you were in India.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not which, and I guess it makes sense you hear, reading about it in the acknowledgments and also hearing you say it, but it's not that it's not that thing that you would think. But
No, especially
again,
in Mumbai. I thought for sure Mumbai'd be, and don't get me wrong, you could see him in Mumbai, but the preponderance of it, we were, now, the other thing is we were at the end of the monsoon season.
okay.
So there's not a lot of tourism. The
Oh,
business is
okay,
still
gotcha.
going in Mumbai, but like Goa is their beach city. Russians all go to Goa. It's a
Hmm.
big resort area. Uh, but since we were at the end of monsoon season, they hadn't started coming in yet. So when we
Right.
were down there, it was everybody was like, what is that guy doing here?
Right.
Uh, Everywhere we went.
What's that guy doing here? And can I take a picture with his wife?
Yeah,
Um, One of the things too that you mentioned in the acknowledgments, and I thought was really telling, and you could maybe speak to it a little bit to the audience, is you did get to tour the slums, which
yeah.
I think that's something that people that don't know much about India have heard about, and they think they probably can envision what it's like. But for someone that's actually gone, what is it really like?
Yeah, the slums were a complete dichotomy because it is absolute poverty. I mean, gut-wrenching poverty. On the
Mhm.
other hand, it's incredibly industrious, and everybody there is kind of proud to be there. I mean, they're
Mhm.
doing work. They are making money. Our tour guide created her own business.
Mhm.
She grew up in the slums, lives in the slums, and said, "You know what? I can make money showing people the slums." And so she's taking us around the slums, and she knows everybody there.
Mhm.
So she's introducing us to the person who's making soap, who shows us how that goes on, to the person making pants, shows us how that goes on, to the person making luggage out of old torn up cars, shows us
Mhm.
how that's going on. And they're very proud to show you, and they're industrious and they're making money, and they're living in abject poverty. It was just a duality of they were happy. It wasn't, when you think slum, everybody's just kind of sitting there like mangy dogs, wondering,
Yeah.
oh, woe is me. They're out working their ass off. They're
Right.
completely poor, but they're working their ass off.
Yeah. Well, and there's something too for, a lot of times people do get caught up in, especially the Western society of you got to make your buck. You got to get the big house. You got to have the multiple cars. You got to have the beach house. You got to have this and that. And I think the, and I mean, again, it's easy to fall into that trap, but those people aren't always super happy. It's actually a lot of times the people that have a simple, and not saying that if you live in a slum, but I think sometimes when you have a simpler existence, you find
Yeah,
more
they're all
joy.
trying to get out of the slum.
Yeah,
Trust me on that. I guess the difference is, when we in a Western, at least I shouldn't say Western, I should say in my own head, when you think of slum, it's because somebody's addicted to drugs and has nowhere else to go and is living in a flop house.
yeah. Skid
That's the
Row. Think of
slum.
Skid Row in
Skid
LA.
Row.
Yeah,
And these guys are living in abject poverty, but they're not Skid Row. They're working.
their work.
And they're
Yeah.
working to try to get out of the slum, but they're all working. It was pretty industrious.
Did you find the tour guide through someone like the hotel, or how did were you able to connect with that?
It was a kind of a we had contacted a couple of people who we have some friends who are from India,
Okay.
and I can't remember the whole circuitous route. It wasn't a hotel thing. It was somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, and we met her, and she had a good sense of humor. So we went to one spot that they had these big stacks of brown sludge there, and she said, "This is where we make our chocolate. You have chocolate in the hotel. This is where the chocolate is. Would you like to eat some chocolate?" And I'm like, "Hell no, I'm not touching that." And so
I,
she takes us into the place where they're cutting the chocolate into bricks,
mhm.
and it's on the floor, and the people are barefoot and they're in the mud cutting the chocolate. And she said, "You sure you don't want a piece of chocolate?" No, I said, "No, I'm good. I'm full. I'm okay." Thinking I'm never eating hotel chocolate again in this place. And
Yeah.
we left, and she started laughing and says, "That's dish soap. I knew
Uh,
you Westerners would think we actually would make chocolate that way, so I did that. Ha ha ha." And she got me because I actually believed her. I thought they were making chocolate, but
I
she
was
was
waiting
just
for you to
making fun of
say
me.
in the corner you saw the actually wrappings that were had the emblem of the hotel. Like
No,
sure enough, that's where they're making it.
they were making it was just little bricks of soap they were making, but it
Gotcha.
looked just like chocolate. And so she made a joke at my expense, which because I, as a Westerner, I believed it hook, line,
You
and sinker
you
that
fell
they'd
for
be
it.
making chocolate.
That's too funny. And the other thing before we talk about the book that I want to bring up is you mentioned that you basically had one of the nicest or the nicest hotel stay is while you were in India,
Yeah,
correct? And
Yeah,
what
and
was that?
I didn't know that either. The dollar was so good. The Oberoi in Jaipur is this phenomenal hotel. I mean, there's no check-in, there's no desk. They meet you out the car like four people with lays waiting on you in champagne,
You're
and
like
they call you
royalty.
to the room with an iPad. You've got your own butler. Every time
Wow.
you open the door, depending on the time of day it is, you wake in the morning, it says, "Good morning, Mr. Taylor," in rose petals. In the
Wow.
afternoons, "Good night, Mr. Taylor," in rose petals. And I got back, and Condé Nast, I think it was Condé Nast, it may have been Travel and Leisure, did a rating of every hotel in the world, and they were number one, the number one
Mm,
hotel in the world. And if it was in the United States, that would be easily, $1,500 a night
yeah.
because the dollar was so good. It was basically like a chintzy New York hotel you can get here for us. We were
Right.
paying for that. And I needed a spot for the wedding party itself, for the book.
Hmm.
And when I hit that place, I'm like, this is perfect.
This will work. So now the burning question is when you came back, were you sure for a while there to do rose petals for Elaine every morning when she got up and spelled
No.
no? No. And she didn't do for you either. Too funny. Okay, well, let's dive into the book. So we've gotten, and Pike's had such a journey here, and the other thing too is every time, and probably because I've met you, I've spent a little time with you, I met Elaine. I always, when I think of Pike and Jennifer, I think of you and Elaine. I don't know if that's I think that's a compliment, but I always, so when I'm reading the characters, I'm always thinking, I'm picturing like your face is on Pike, and Elaine is on Jennifer. So. But yeah, talk about getting all the way to now you've got Pike in, in this really place that most Westerners don't know much about. But just talk about the story and what you're doing with
Yeah.
Pike this time along.
Well, actually, the story's coming to fruition right now in the real world. So it's
They
based
normally
on
are
rare.
with you, Brad. Normally
Yeah.
you're right on time with these
I
things.
actually sent a note to my publisher saying with a news article from the New York Times, I was like, "Yep, we made the news already." So rare earth elements are a huge thing. That anything with a screen, what we're looking on right now is
Yeah,
Zoom. None of that could happen without rare earth elements.
right.
It's in everything from cell phones to TVs to anything that electronics that you use, Tesla cars, all that stuff
Hmm.
requires rare earth elements. And on top of that, everything in the national defense requires it. The F-35 fighter we were talking about earlier, they has a $400,000 helmet. Everybody's proud of this helmet. Well, everything in that helmet might as well be called the rare earth element helmet. China has the monopoly on it and has had the monopoly for quite a while. They make make and refine about 80% of the world's rare earth elements. And if
Yep.
they cut it off from us, that would really impact our ability for national defense, not
Hmm.
to mention our ability to manufacture anything, you
Yeah.
in the modern world. And so that began the plot. And as fate would have it, because of the tariff war that's going on, China just cut off all our exports to rare earth elements. And I'm like, better look to India. That's where
Hey.
it's going to happen. And while I was doing my research, the actually while I was in India, they found a huge deposit of rare earth elements and lithium in Upper
Yeah.
India. And when that happened, I was like, okay, that's the plot.
Yeah.
And so I started going from there. So
Did you?
basically, the problem with rare earth elements, they're not really rare. They're kind of everywhere. They're
Right.
just really, really hard to get out of the ground and refine.
Hmm.
And in so doing, you make an enormous mess.
Right.
And because of that, the United States doesn't allow you to do it. We had a rare earth element mine here in the United States, but because of the strictures for the ecology of the mine itself,
Hmm.
it's just not profitable. You can't make a profit doing that. And so the miners just quit doing it. They're like, this is not worth the effort. We'll just let China destroy their country because they don't
Hmm.
care,
Yeah.
and we'll just get it from China. And so that's basically what happened. So in the fictional word in the book, this deposit, which is real, they're going to build a rare earth element mine, and we say, hey, we'll help you covertly. We'll finance that damn thing because we want to break China's monopoly.
Hmm.
China finds out about the mine and says, no, no, we want to keep the monopoly. We're going to
Yeah.
break that mine.
Right.
And so they hire some Sikh separatists. They don't know they're Sikh separatists. They hire some guys, some gunslingers to kill the billionaire of the mine.
Hmm.
And in so doing, those guys end up having their own agenda, which
Hmm.
everybody's like, now, what in the hell's going on? China's even saying, whoops, we shouldn't have hired those guys. So it's kind of that's why it's called a gray zone.
That was a good question I was going to ask is where did the title and do you are you normally the one picking the titles or does the publisher or is there a
Yeah,
collaboration?
well, it goes back and forth. Sometimes you hit it nail on the head, boom, right off the bat.
Yeah.
Other times you're fighting back and forth, up and down, left and right, over and over again. In this case, it fit because the gray zone is hybrid warfare.
Hmm.
Other people call it the gray zone. It's the difference between full out war and complete peace. All the activities that go on there, from economic coercion, industrial espionage to assassinations, proxy wars, insurgencies, all of that is inside the gray zone.
Hmm.
And that's what's happening in this book. Is that we're trying to economically get this rare earth elements to break the cycle with China. They're using assassins running around to kill the billionaire himself, and Pike Logan himself were operating in a gray zone to stop the whole thing.
I know you've released your list of stops where you're doing for your book tour. Are you going to see Mark Greaney? Because Mark, with his series, with having the Gray Man, I think Mark holding into the gray zone would be, an awfully good photo. So
Yeah, not this time. So we went to Memphis to Novel Bookstore last three
last
tours,
time,
and this,
okay,
but we did not go to California. It's so far to get to California that if you're going to go to California, you're gonna kind of focus on the western half of the
on the
United
west,
States. You're not going to
yeah,
go all the way over here and all the way over there.
right,
So
yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the burning questions, of course, to end, before we wrap this up is, are you already deep at work at Pike 20?
oh
And
yeah,
you are, okay. So we're
yeah. So that was Argentina. We came back from Argentina a couple months ago,
okay. Yeah, I was gonna see if I can
and
get a little hint of where we're going. Had you been down there before?
I've been to Brazil. I've never been to Argentina, so it
Okay.
was kind of unique. We went up and down that whole place too. So that was really unique up from the north. That came out because, believe it or not, the largest diaspora of Lebanese is in Brazil,
Hmm.
the tri-border region known as the Triple Frontier. That is the largest collection of Hezbollah outside of Lebanon. So that was enough to write a story on.
That was enough to write a story. Yeah. No, I love it, and I love how they're timely. The research you put into it, and then getting the boots on the ground. I think that it just, again, it sets you apart from a lot of the other authors. So keep doing it. Next year we'll have Pike 20 out, and
Yeah,
at the rate we're going, we're gonna keep this train going for as long as possible. So.
absolutely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So last thing, I always ask the final question to everyone is, and I think you'd agree with me, life is like a book. You have a first page and you have a last page. You don't know how many pages are in between that, which I think is a blessing. But as a writer of what, 19 novels, 10, I think it's 10 novellas. Are you up to 10 novellas, I believe?
Yeah, I think
So
so.
quite a lot. You've written a couple million words plus probably. So, but you get to write as a writer, you get to write your last page. What does Brad Taylor write for his last page in the book?
From the last page of my life,
Your book. Your book. Yes,
my
Brad.
book.
Your
Well,
book.
my book, it'd be my book. I'd be sitting on a beach with a pina colada as the sun's going down. That's what I'm writing.
Perfect. I love it. I get all kinds of answers to that question, and I had someone recently. They were just like, "I'm gonna need a moment," and I'm like, "No, let's take your time. We can edit. I can hit pause, no problem." So I like that one. I think if you're gonna go out, you're going out with a nice sunset, it's fruity drink. Yeah, we're doing good. So, where should everyone go to get into the gray zone, Brad?
They can go wherever fine books are sold. If they go to my website, bradtaylorbooks.com, they can read an excerpt of the Gray Zone. They can see the tour schedule. They can see all that.
Well, thank you, Brad. Thanks for coming on. And again, folks, we got the book here doing a giveaway. Wherever you watch this episode, YouTube, if you see it somewhere else, just post something in the comments. I will grab one of your names and I will send you the hardcover of Brad's book, Into the Gray Zone. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Eric.